I'm Tom Selzer from Livewire, and joining me today is James Gill from VanEck to discuss how AI may be changing the face of investing strategy. James, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
James, I think technological advancements are nothing new to investing. We've seen how things like online brokerage, ETFs have changed the way we invest. But what would you say is the key breakthrough we're seeing with AI at the moment?
Yeah, and I think you've said it perfectly, Tom. I mean, the world of investing, is certainly not new to technological advancements. You've said a few yourself there. And I think if you look at it from the perspective of like online brokerage, for example, it's made trading more cheaper, more accessible. My personal favorite ETFs, it's really been a democratization tool. It's made diversification cheaper. But I think what's most important is if you look at all of these technological advancements, it's shaped the way we act, how we actually go about the investing. But it actually doesn't talk about, okay, well, what are we actually investing in? And I feel like AI has a really big part to play in that, in selecting, okay, what are the investment strategies that's going to give me, I suppose, the most compelling investment outcome? And I think the reason why that's so important is because if you look at the edge in investing over the years, I mean, firstly, it was about information. Whoever had that information early and first had that investing edge. But now information is just so readily available. I mean, I would almost argue that there's too much information out there, right? Then the edge moved to analysis. But now you have computers, softwares that pretty much does all that analysis for free anyway. So then the edge has moved again, and it's really in that searching. It's really about how can I search in a scalable way for as much investment opportunities as I can in that short period of time. And I think the really exciting thing here is the fact that this was something that was only reserved for those professional grade research firms, right? But I think that's now within the reach of ordinary investors like you and I, and I think that's really exciting, Tom.
I think AI has dominated the conversation in terms of stock performance, obviously, but I think there's been less focus on how it's actually changing the way we invest, like you've said. I think you've touched on it there, the accessibility of data, of information. But what are you seeing on the front?
Yeah, and again, I mean, AI has certainly made a lot of headlines over the past year or two, and I think, which AI stock is going to be that, next kind of, 10 baggers or whatever, I mean, that's really anyone's best guess. But I think for me, the more interesting and long-term way of thinking about it is, well, how is AI going to shape investing as we know it? And I think in order to answer that question properly, it's to look at, well, from a traditional funds management perspective, you have this brilliant research analyst, who probably knows the ins and outs. They've read every filing, met the management of every single company that they're, covering, right? But I mean, there's a human ceiling to it. They might know 40 or 50 companies at most. And you're effectively going as deep as you can within a narrow slice. But I think what AI really enables you to do is it effectively allows you to test that exact same, I suppose, measure with the same level of rigor, but most importantly, without falling in love with a particular stock or maybe even a loser, or not getting tired across thousands of different companies. And I suppose the way I like to look at it is, you're entering this dark room, and rather than shining a torch on something, you're turning the floodlights on. And I think that's what's really exciting about AI in investing.
And I think VanEck's launching their own AI-powered ETF. I think it's the VanEck Dynamic International Equity ETF, ticker code GOAT. Can you explain how that came about and how it's going to work in practice?
GOAT's probably one of the most exciting products that I've ever worked on. It's not every day that you get to claim to be the first. But GOAT really is a genuine first in Australian markets. It's giving you access to 150 international companies, which have really been selected using generative reinforcement learning. And I suppose to give you a bit of a flavor as to how the model selects these companies is, well, firstly, behind this AI architecture, we have 100 terabytes worth of data. And to give you a bit of a sense as to how much that is, it's about tens of millions of books, stored in this massive, library, as you'd call it. And it's really a 4-step process. The first step is generating the investment ideas. And how it does is for all of the approximately 1,200 or so companies within the investable universe, it's testing tens of thousands of signals across company and industry fundamentals. So this can be like your return on equity, your leverage. And it's also looking at technical and pair trading signals, such as momentum, pricing behaviors, your relative strength index. And also thirdly, your macroeconomic indicators, such as your GDP prints, your inflation prints and unemployment, what have you. And at this stage, it's really forming all these ideas using all of these investment signals for each of those companies. And then the second step is scoring them. So each of those companies essentially gets a report card. How well did it score against all of these measures? Did it result in positive return? And if so, what was that journey like? Was it observable and persistent throughout the cycle? And then third, and this is really where the AI and the generative reinforcement kicks in, it essentially learns from it. So in a similar way that a sporting athlete will watch over their tapes, for the past couple of games and essentially learns how they performed, each of these, companies effectively are measured against decades and decades of data and how did it perform relative to that. And it doesn't stop there. It effectively learns from any mistakes that it might have made, and it makes a smarter decision to guide its next movements. And then fourth, it validates that. So effectively, any single investment strategy that has been put through that gauntlet and that survived all of the first three steps are then effectively deployed, and it effectively gives you a portfolio of 150 international companies that have passed all that test. And this process is repeated over and over again, and hence the name dynamic.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that. What is the timetable for how often that process is repeated? Is that daily, weekly, monthly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I suppose it's constant. It's every second. And I suppose wherever there's new sources of data or new information surfacing in the economy, that is effectively going to get filtered in, and that's going to reflect real time. And the portfolio then rebalances on a monthly basis to reflect that adaptive nature.
And maybe on that point, I think AI and machine learning have obviously been part of systematic investing for a while now. In what way would you say that GOAT's doing something similar to that, and in what ways are doing maybe something different?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, here at VanEck, we're massive believers and supporters of systematic investing. We've got our own systematic strategies, that target quality, growth, value. And I think the similarities are quite easy to see in the sense that, it's very rules-based, it's got very disciplined execution, and importantly, it's got no emotion as well. And I think the differences lie in the fact that while a lot of these systematic strategies are anchored to one specific style or a set of factors or styles, what GOAT really is trying to do is, okay, well, rather than staying anchored to a specific set of styles throughout the cycle, it's effectively going to try to look at, okay, well, what new information and signals are coming through that's going to guide stock allocation. And I think the way I like to look at it is, systematic strategy can be looked at as like a printed map, right? A map it's great. It's going to help me get from A to B. But I think what AI does is, it's really like your sat nav. It's still going to serve the same purpose, but isn't it great when it tells you, okay, don't go this way because there's a traffic collision, go another way. So effectively, it's taking you to that same destination, but it's being very adaptive in its approach.
And I think fundamentally, the ultimate question here is whether AI-powered investing can actually drive better performance for investors. What are your thoughts there, and what is the data suggesting on that front at the moment?
Yeah, so I mean, that's really the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it, Tom? And I think the discipline that we like to apply for all of our product development is, we want to make sure that we have a very comprehensive list of simulated data, and for the index that GOAT will be tracking, we've got 21 years of simulated information, and it's been very pleasing to see that it has delivered persistent outperformance. But I think the way I like to look at it is, the headline return itself is not as important as how that return premium was achieved. And I think over 21 years, that's a lot of market cycles. If you look at what's happened in the past year alone, that's a lot of different opportunities for us to effectively stress test the efficacy of this strategy. And I think it's been very pleasing. It has outperformed by about 3% per annum. And I think and that alpha has been delivered quite persistently throughout various different market cycles, because it does look at GFC, the sovereign debt crisis, the COVIDs. So in that regard, I think what's going to be most exciting for us is, okay, well, in future market episodes, how is this going to effectively learn from previous ones to effectively position itself going forward?
And finally, how can investors actually access GOAT?
Yeah, so GOAT's going to be freely available to trade on ASX using any online brokerage platform from the 20th of July under the ticker GOATs.
It'll be interesting to see how it performs. James, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom.
Thanks for watching. For more great content, make sure to check out our YouTube channel.